Hi, it's Alexis back with another educational video, and in honor of deer season we decided to do a video all about white-tailed deer. So white-tailed deer are our state game mammal here in the state of Michigan, and they are an extremely abundant mammal, actually found in every single county in our state, and we've seen signs of them on all of the CWC preserves. Because of their ability to thrive in a wide variety of habitats, white-tailed deer have a very successful population in the Midwest region. They are very resourceful and they adapt very well to different types of habitat. However, they do tend to thrive in young forests where there is ample small trees and brush with things like buds and branches and grass and a variety of leaves that are within their reach and low enough for them to feed on easily. Here in Michigan, we'll also find white-tailed deer in fields, croplands, and marshes, and you'll learn that their habits vary depending on where they're living and what type of habitat they are spending their time in. So I'll give you some examples in the changes of behavior that I mentioned. For example, deer who would be living in a farmland habitat would be primarily feeding in a cornfield, and then they would choose to bed in a place with cover, such as a nearby woodlot. Whereas deer that are living in a more northern climate may choose to take cover in swamps and marshes and boggy areas and then come out to feed in drier areas where there's an abundance of shrubbery and things where they can munch on the leaves. Here in our state, because of the abundance of the population of white-tailed deer, we even will frequently see deer in populated areas where they'll be grazing on a golf course or on someone's lawn, and they may even be bedding down in wooded or covered areas right near where people are living. So I've brought some artifacts out so that we could take an up-close and personal look at the white-tailed deer and really get to know some of its features. This is the skull of a male white-tailed deer, commonly referred to as a buck. And the first thing we're going to look at on the skull to get to know more about these deer is the teeth. So I'm going to give you kind of a close-up here of the teeth, and you can see that they're rather flat, not extremely sharp, somewhat wide, and they're actually made for grinding and mashing down plant material, and that is because white-tailed deer are herbivores and they have a completely plant-based diet. So white-tailed deer, here we're missing the bottom jaw, so we're just seeing the top teeth. Note that they're actually missing what would normally be the front teeth, and here they have just a hard palate that helps them to grind down and mash up vegetation, and then they would have a lower jaw with similar kind of flattened molars that helps them grind up plant matter. And interestingly enough, you can actually, if you know what to look for, you can actually age a deer by looking at how much wear is shown on its teeth. So, as I said, white-tailed deer are herbivores, and that means they're feeding on plant matter. So here in Michigan, that's going to mean buds, leaves, twigs, all of that they're going to find on different hardwoods like birch, maple, aspen, poplar, things that are growing throughout the state, sassafras in the more southern regions of the state. But that could also mean things like in the winter months they would be feeding on conifers. If they're living near an orchard or near fruit trees, they will feed on apples and other fruits. They feed on acorns that come off of trees. They'll eat hundreds of varieties of vegetation depending on what's available to them. And that could even include the plants that are growing in your garden. That could include corn or other crops that are being grown agriculturally. Again, as I said, they're very adaptable and resourceful herbivores. One other interesting tidbit about the diet and the anatomy of a white-tailed deer is that they actually have a 4-chambered stomach, and so that allows them to help break down all of that vegetation that they're consuming. So kind of an interesting fact. So switching gears from talking about teeth and diet, we're actually going to talk about one of the trademark characteristics of bucks or male white-tailed deer, which is the antlers. So antlers by definition grow in pairs, and they branch forward and protrude from the front of the skull. So you can see, if I show you up close here, growing out of kind of the forehead are the pedicles, And that's actually the first part that starts to grow in a young buck. And then there's the burr here, this kind of wide base of the antler growing up into the main beam, this part here, and then the points or tines grow off from that. Antlers are grown in the spring. Basically, when the daylight hours extend, it triggers a testosterone boost in the male deers, which causes the antlers to start growing. They grow very quickly from the time they start until they're pretty much finished, is on average a 4-month span. Now, when the antlers first grow, they're actually covered in velvet. So it's a very soft, velvety fur that actually has nerves and blood vessels running through it. And then in late summer, when the daylight hours begin to shorten, it actually triggers the reverse effect. And when the blood vessels dry up on that velvet, the deer will start to rub that velvet off, leading to the kind of bare bones antlers that we'll see in fall during hunting season and into the winter before the antlers are shed. So that also creates kind of an interesting effect where you can see a rough texture at the base of the antler. And then from where this has been rubbed, we kind of have a smooth, glossy texture. So we've got, I'm trying to make sure you can see that, we've got a smooth, nice, even texture from the rubbing, and then down here at the base, it's very rough texture. So the rubbing for a buck is helping to remove that velvet, and it's also a way for them to mark their territory. Male whitetail deer would also use their antlers for combat during the mating season and to basically protect their territory. So after the mating season, as we move into winter, the bucks are going to shed these antlers, and basically that's going to fall off and leave a wound that will heal over, and then the following spring a new set of antlers will grow. So once they fall off and are on the forest floor, if they're found by other animals, they'll be consumed as a nutrient-dense food source. While we're still looking at the skull, I wanted to point out a couple other things. White-tailed deer have an excellent sense of smell, they have excellent hearing, and they have really good vision. And so obviously the ears are no longer here, but they have large ears that allow them to hear really well. And then you can see the eye sockets here. And you can see that they're placed on the sides of the skull and what would be the sides of the face of the white-tailed deer. And that gives them very peripheral-based vision, which allows them to see almost entirely around their body, which helps them when looking out for predators. They also have very keen night vision and just overall good vision. Their sense of smell is even better than their sight and is actually said to be about 1,000 times stronger than the sense of smell that humans have. So oftentimes they can wind or smell a predator on the air before they would actually see or hear it. And so I'm just going to show you here, this is the nasal cavity. And you can see inside this kind of complex structure inside the nasal cavity, which really helps them filter scents out and pick up very faint scents. You can see that they have a large nasal cavity. I'll show you the back of the skull. So this opening here would lead to the brain cavity. So in a live white-tailed deer, the brain would be living in this cavity, and then this portion here would connect to the spine. So that's a really up-close look at the skull of a male white-tailed deer. I wanted to really quickly show you, these are just some rubber replicas. So they have cloven hooves, which basically just means that the hoof is split into 2 toes. And so when you see deer tracks, you see those 2 little kind of pointed triangles. And then obviously a white-tailed deer is a 4-legged animal, so they would have 4 sets of these. And then just a short way up the leg, they actually have dew claws as well. Their hoofs are actually made of keratin, which is the same material that human fingernails are made of. So that's kind of interesting. And then, although these are replicas, the hooves on a real live deer are actually black in color as well. So I brought a hide out so we could talk about the fur or the coat of a white-tailed deer also. So I'm going to try to zoom in here so you can get a little bit of a look at the texture and kind of the length of the hair that's growing on this hide. White-tailed deer are extremely well protected and insulated by their fur. So they actually have hollow guard hairs and then a furry undercoat, and that allows them to stay extremely well insulated during the winter months so that they can live in snowy and very cold climates. So you can see that the fur is varying shades of brown, and then there's some gray in there, and that allows them to camouflage really well in Michigan forests. And then here on the underside, which would be the deer's belly, there's a white. And then of course, per their namesake, they have the brown tail bordered in white, which is white underneath. And their white tail is actually very important. They use it for communication in a lot of different ways. So for some signals, the tail could be down and flared out. Other signals, the tail could be up and kind of twitching back and forth. When they're running through the forest, you can usually see that tail will be up. And some experts say that that is so that they can see each other and kind of stay together when they're running. So there's a lot of different communication techniques that white-tailed deer have with each other that they rely on this tail for. So it's much more than just a tail. It's also a signal and a source of communication. And then, like I said, it's kind of the namesake for this animal. So super interesting. One last interesting thing I wanted to mention is that white-tailed deer are crepuscular animals, which means that they're coming out in those dawn and dusk hours of the day. So not full daylight, not full dark. That's when they're going to be moving, traveling, and eating. And that gives them a good amount of cover. They're very shy, sensitive, cautious animals, and so those kind of low light hours suit their needs really well as far as traveling and coming out and eating. So I know I just gave you a ton of information on the anatomy of white-tailed deer. I hope that you found some of that interesting and some of that useful. Please feel free to share this video and reach out to us if you have any questions. Have a great day, and thank you so much for tuning in. Get out and enjoy some trails. Bundle up. I know it's cold, but it's still enjoyable to be outdoors, and we hope you all get out there and enjoy the season.